Hello, my friends. I hope you're ready for some adventures in cloud warehousing. Yesterday, my pal Adrian gave me a call, and he said,
Hey mate, I was at a Snowflake demo and the guy showed a cool data sharing feature. Show me how it works.
let's give that a go. After you apply for your Snowflake trial, the first thing you'll see is this portal login screen. In my case, I'm using the Enterprise Edition. The first page that you go to is the worksheets page. On the left-hand side, you can see the default databases that Snowflake provides and one extra one that I created. Our goal is to share selected data from this database with our delightful customers. Now, what kind of data do we want to share? I've organized it in two new schemas. Schema 1 has a table called Iris, which has the raw data. If you click on that table, you can get a quick summary here. And let's actually preview the data. We see that each row represents measurements for one flower of a certain species. And if we want to do some aggregations of that data, we have this view, which gives you one row per species with the average measurements for it. And if you want to see what the calculations are in the background, you can click on the SQL button and see those in the SQL code. And it's the same deal with the other schema. You've got a table which has the raw data for the Titanic disaster and a view which does some aggregations on it. So let's jump over onto the shares. And initially, you will see nothing. That is because right now we're logged in with the sysadmin credentials. You can see them on the top right. What we want to do is go to the account admin credentials, and this role has the ability to configure the shares. We see that we have some inbound shares already with some sample data from Snowflake. What we want to do is go into the outbound shares where currently nothing exists, and we want to create a share, so we become a data provider. What should we call our share? We are allowed one share per database, so I'm going to select the demo database. And what do we want to share from that database? Initially, I'm just going to go with the raw data. And I'll add a comment. And I'll click Create. Now, this page in the background is showing that the share has been created. In the modal window, we can see the option to create a preview of the data just to make sure that we're sharing the right stuff. So I'm just going to double check. And yep, that all looks fine. Final step is to add the consumers of the data. So we've created the container of the share saying what we want to share. Now we decide who gets access to it. You'll notice that there's two account types here. Let's first go to the full account type. This is what you have when you create your own Snowflake trial or if you become a paying Snowflake customer. And all that we have to do here is type in the Snowflake account name. I'll type in Adrian's one now. And now that person can access your Snowflake share. However, there is one thing to note about this. If you're in a full account, then you, as the account holder, are responsible for managing your credentials. I know Adrian's a very busy person and might not actually remember his credentials, so I'm going to give him a reader account. And in this case, I'm the one who creates the credentials for him. Now, I've pre-created a reader account, which is called here Datacom Reader, and we're limited to just a single reader account for the trial. However, if you were in a production environment, then you'd probably have a separate one for each of your customers. So we're going to add that reader account. And that's it, from our perspective anyway. Let's actually have a look at what it would be like from Adrian's perspective when he tries to access this. So I'm going to make a copy here, and we know that the reader account is called Iris20118. So we'll change that account name here. And we have the same login window as before. when I created the reader account, I was able to assign it credentials. So I'm going to paste those in now. Alrighty, so the first place that we end up is on the worksheets page. If we look on the left-hand side, right now we see no databases there. What we need to do is jump into the shares page first, so that we can create a database from the share. When I look here, I see nothing at all. That's because I'm logged in with the default sysadmin role. I'm going to jump into the account admin role. And yes, we do have an inbound share, the datacom share that we just created. So what we'll do is create database from secure share. I'll grant access to all the roles inside it. And now when I jump into the worksheets area and I set my context, I've shared it with every role. So now even though I'm a sysadmin, I have access to it. And I can see that the database is available. We have the same raw data as before.
Mate, this is great. You know what would be even better? Aggregated data. And some more rows while you're at it.
Easily done. All we have to do is jump into our previous share and add some of those security views that we've already created. So what I'll do is edit the share. In the tables and views, I could manually click through with the and through the hierarchy. However, I'm going to take a shortcut and I'm just going to display the views and then tick all of those. I'll apply that. It says it succeeded. Let's double check on Adrian's end. And yes, we see that the view has come through. Now, the other thing that Adrian asked for was a bit of extra data. So let's upload some more rows into the iris datasets. What we can do is manually do it through the web interface. We'll go into the databases area. Then we click on our specific database, click on the iris table, and we can load the table with some more data. I've got some local stored files here. It'll just take a moment to read some metadata from that. And now it's encrypting the files locally and uploading them. They're a very small data set, so it takes very little time. And I uploaded the data from my main account. However, you'll notice that the data immediately comes through on Adrian's end. So right now, Iris here is saying 150 rows. That's as of 2 minutes ago. If I refresh, you'll see that it has 175 rows. So all 25 rows are immediately available to Adrian. All right, so that should be enough to get him to play around with it.
Mate, the new data quality is bad. Can you fix it this week, my man? Also, I'm not getting a big data vibe. Give me a million rows to imbibe.
Oh dear, maybe I should have verified that data before I uploaded it. No worries, we can quickly cleanse it. Let's jump into the worksheets area and we can load some of the iris data. I'm going to paste a query in here, which does a check for the rows which have a null in one of the columns. All right, we see that we have 8 rows which have at least one null value somewhere in there. So what do we do now? Well, what we can do is run another query. And what this query does is it gets the average of the good values in each of those columns and stores them inside a variable. Then when we update the table, then we replace all those null values with that average. It says it updated 5 of the rows. And let's have a go at looking for more nulls in that data set. We get the result back of 0 rows, which implies that they were all fixed. Now, there is one thing that we might be interested in doing for auditability, which is looking at the state of the rows as of before we fix them. So Snowflake has this cool feature called time travel, and I can simply run the same query as before to select the rows, and all I have to add is a little clause saying, give me what the data was like in the past 60 seconds, which forms a minute, times however many minutes we want, in which case when we run that, it'll show us the state as of 2 minutes ago. And it does show all the nulls as they previously existed, which is great for auditability. Well, I'm certainly glad Adrian's keen on this cloud warehousing business. So let's create a new table for him with a whole bunch more data. Let's remove the previous query that we ran. And I do have some city bike data lying around on my laptop, so let's upload that for him. What I will do is run a query to create that table inside the public schema, which, as you can see, is currently empty. I will run that query, and we now see that there is a city bike trip table inside here, which currently has 0 rows. So let's upload it manually through the web interface. I will jump into the databases tab. I will select the same database and the empty table, which we can see here has 0 rows and 0 size. And let's load some of that data. We see that we can quickly upload that, and it's locally got the size of 400 megs. This is before Snowflake compresses it. Oh, we've got an error. Yeah, I forgot to mention that when you use the web interface, there's a 50 megabytes limit on what kind of file size you can upload. And this is because of the browser limitations themselves, nothing to do with Snowflake. So I'm afraid what we'll have to do is write some code using the Snowflake CLI. But don't worry, the documentation has lots of code samples that we can copy from. And by default, you'd normally have to type in your credentials before you can connect to Snowflake. However, there is a config file you can configure so that it automatically does so, as we can see here, where it immediately jumps into the same database that we were working with before. So what I'm going to do is run a command. Run one. And what this command does is it takes a local file stored on my file system and puts it into the Snowflake so-called staging area, which is where it stores data before it puts it into a user-accessible table. And what always trips me up is that instead of pressing enter, you do control enter. So please keep that in mind. We see that the file was uploaded with gzip compression. And the next command that we'll run is to copy that data from staging into the table. So you'll notice that if I refresh this page, then city bike trip still has no rows. Once I run this command, then it'll copy into that table from the staging area. And I'm using it the incorrect file format here. So I will just fix that one. And now we see that it was successfully uploaded. We've got the file name here and the location in the staging area. We see that 10,000 rows were passed and loaded, and that no errors were detected. And when we refresh through the web GUI, we see now that the city bike table has 10,000 rows, which is a lot more than previous tables. Now, our job is not quite finished. We need to make this new table accessible through the share that we're already sharing with Adrian. So I'm going to edit that. And on top of the existing tables, I'm going to add the city bike trip datasets. And when we look at it from Adrian's perspective, then he should now have access. And yep, there's the table. Now, before I let Adrian play around with this, I am a bit wary of just how keen he is to push the limits of Snowflake. And I'm worried that he's going to use up all of my service credits. So what I'm going to do is jump into a window here called Account, which you can only access when you're using the account admin credentials. And here I can see the usage of on my data warehouse, and I can see that I've been very sparing with the credits. Now, just to make sure that it stays that way, I'm going to jump into the resource monitor area. And what these resource monitors do is ensure that no credits are used beyond preset limits. So I'm going to add Adrian cutoff monitor. And the maximum number of credits that I'm going to allow him to use is 20 per day. And I'm going to have this limit on the warehouse that I shared with him. I'm going to customize it so that instead of the monthly limit, it's going to be daily, that it'll start in the moment I create this monitor, and that it'll be never ending, which effectively means that it'll last until the end of my trial. Now, what actions do I want this monitor to take? First off, I want it to notify me when he uses up 50% of his credits for the day. So I can flick him a quick email and say, hey, be sparing, otherwise you'll be stuck with nothing to do for the rest of the day. Then I will tell it to suspend and notify when he comes to 3/4 of his credits. And this means that his currently running queries will be able to finish. However, he won't be able to run any new queries on that day. And if his queries are gobbling up large amounts of compute, then I'm going to, at the end, say that any queries that reach 100% are immediately cut off. And we see that that's resource monitor is immediately effective, so that I can now hand it over for him to play around with. That's all I had to show you today. Thanks for joining me on this adventure of data warehousing in the cloud.